Hey, yo, listen, you guys don't want to miss this episode. We just got done filming a new episode of the Bros to Men podcast. The title is Help, I'm Toxic.
Ooh, I got it real bad.
I'm toxic. Listen, you guys don't want to miss it. We're going to go in. We start disagreeing with one another. We start giving tips and pointers of what it means to be toxic. Right. You don't want to miss it. Click the link and join us for this episode.
Yes, sir.
That's not healthy. So, as athletes, one of the things I always say is we got to watch film. We gotta watch film. And film, let me tell you something, man.
Boy, it's cooking.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about film, babe.
You learned.
When you took an L and you have film the next day, when the coach would rewind and put the laser on you, and you guys watch the same clip, where were you at? This was your man. Let's watch it again. Where were you? Oh, you slow. Look at you get shook right here. That's what you got to do, because
that's so good.
You got bad habits, right? You didn't make the proper read.
Yeah.
So his whole point is, I'm gonna humiliate the crap out of you so that you will never make this mistake again, because you remember what humiliation feels like, right?
Oh, you, bro. That means I love you, bro. That means I'll go to war with you.
Fire, baby.
The reason why you need to know your identity is because when you know who you are, people don't get to define it for you. So when I tell you guys who you have in your circle is important.
You're listening to the Bros to Men podcast with Cameron Persad, Jeff T. Osborne, and Roy Rand.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Bros to Men podcast, where we give you guys content that inspires action.
Come on.
If you guys been with us for a while, you already know. I'm Jeff.
I'm your boy Dips.
Cam, good to see y'all, man. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute, man.
Hot second.
Okay, life has been lifing right now.
Hey, say that part.
Like life has been life in a good way. I mean, we've got so many things going on, so many different moves, so many moving pieces. Kids graduating, going to high school.
Come on now,
boy. I'm going through a whole little emotional phase right now. So
I see the gray hair.
You see it?
I got my boy stressed.
You know what I'm saying? After my daughter got through middle school, I decided to grow my hair out. So new and improved. But hey, we're so excited that you guys are with us. Listen, you've been with us for a while, or if you're brand new, we want to make sure that at the end of this podcast that you have something that you can walk away with. It's three of us brothers, man, and we talk about what it means to transition from us being bros back in the day and the lessons that we learned and are still learning.
Learning.
That help, and we still learning.
For sure.
That helps us to become men, right?
Come on now.
So look, I want to hop into this because I don't even want to waste any time. So when we talked about this new podcast that we have coming up, this new episode, I was like, yo, I got a topic that I want to talk about. And this topic right here is crucial. And I had this title, and I don't know if we'll tag this when we post it up, but the idea of today we're going to talk about is help. I'm toxic.
I'm toxic.
Ooh, help. I'm toxic.
Yeah. And let's break this down.
Let's break it down. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give you guys like the rundown of where this came from, how the thought came to me, and then let's break down toxicity. Let's break down what it means to be toxic, whether it's a toxic relationship, a toxic mindset. Like, we're gonna have this raw dialogue, and as you guys know, none of the stuff that we talk about is ever scripted. This is just brothers having conversations and just trying to give you guys some jewels that inspires action. So I want to give you this backdrop, okay? So in the last year and a half, as a coach, as a motivational speaker, as a pastor, doing all this stuff that I get to do, I realized that there were things that were happening as my kids were becoming teenagers, specifically my son, that there were ways that I would respond to certain things that I was like, okay, this isn't normal. Like, and Nadi would constantly tell me, like, babe, look, the way that you're doing this isn't normal. And I had to look back and my daughter and my son are talking constantly like, oh my gosh, dad, like, that's toxic. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like my daughter telling me, yeah, look, dad, why are you so toxic? And I said, hold on, what you talking about? And you know, your natural reaction is to get frustrated. Your natural reaction is to get upset. Until I had to get a moment where I really had to evaluate myself in these last year and a half, maybe 2 years, where I did some deep work. Like, I did some deep personal work on myself to really ask the questions like, dang, Jeff, like, are you really toxic? Like, have you guys ever had that moment for you in your life or in a period where you had to take a moment where you thought what you were doing was normal, But you actually realize, like, yo, this behavior, this mindset is toxic. Holla at your boy.
Every day.
Every day.
Where we grew up and how we grew up, at the end of the day, it comes down to survival. We grew up in extreme environments where you had to be tough. You had to think a certain way in order to survive.
Right.
And that's when we were, just bros coming up. But as we became men and we're no longer in those survival situations where maybe being aggressive in certain situations or talking like this in certain situations, not showing vulnerability in certain situations helped us.
Right.
Now those ways that we were patterned aren't helping us optimize the future, right?
Yep.
Sometimes I'll get angry or agitated by stuff and be like, yo, man, what's good? And it's like, no, you got to chill. You're not in that environment anymore. And to survive or to thrive, to go from survival to thriving.
Talk about it.
It just comes to changing your perception, which is extremely hard. It's easy to do the work. It's easy to take action. It's hard to change your brain. So changing your mind about something, and also, should you change your mind about it? Like, what is that line? Sometimes you if someone comes at your kids in a certain way, it's time to get toxic.
Right. It's go time.
And so there's a balance, and I think we need to define that balance and draw those lines.
What's your take on it, Cam?
I mean, I agree 100% with Dip said, and I think that this behavior that, we call this toxic behavior, I think you have to identify the root of it, because like anything else, I think too, you can't address what's growing above the surface. You need to get down to the nitty gritty under the surface, the root where things are really festering, right?
Right.
And I think when people say, you need to work on yourself, a lot of times we're working on the perception that we're putting out to people. Right, so it's like I need to come off a different way. Like you said, I need to change the tone, but that's not really addressing the real issue beneath and why it's such an automatic response for you to go to that place, right? So I think, like Dip said, I think you have to do some homework. Like you mentioned, that internal work. I think you really have to figure out what it is that is causing that behavior. What is it that's still lingering in your psyche that's taking you back to that place every single time, to where those old ways, right? That old behavior, that old, not let's talk it out, but homie, get active. Like, where do you learn to change that? And I think it's important because I think most of us just start kind of creating this identity, like I've been through so much. And you blame that on why you are the way you are today. And we're quick to blame it on. It's where I grew up at, right? It's this foul relationship I was in because I can't trust nobody. So did me dirty. But I think if you're not careful, it becomes your identity. So what happens is you start walking around looking like someone who's gone through stuff instead of someone who looks like they're living for something, right? Boy. So your identity is like, you could tell that person's been through something. You could tell they're in that survival mode. But again, it's about not looking like the person that's been through something, but the person that's living for something. And I think in order to transition to get to that point, you got to do that dirty work.
Wait, you said not looking like somebody who's been through something, but somebody who's
the person that's living for
something.
something, right? So I'm not living with PTSD. I'm not living in defense mode because of what I've been through, but I'm learning from what I've been through so I can live for something better, so I know what I don't want. And I think that's the transition that Dips was referring to, is that we have to look at, use those past experiences where you don't want to go through now, opposed to I'm gonna walk around with this identity because of what I've been through. Now I'm gonna use that to change my future, and not to use it as an excuse to be this person that's never gonna change. Yeah.
See, okay, so I love that you did this, bro, because one of the books that I read, and this is no plug, this is not this isn't a sponsorship or anything like that. But there was a book that Nadia bought for me that rocked me, and it was a book that was co-authored. It was Oprah Winfrey, and it was a doctor by the name of Bruce Perry. And the book title was What Happened to You? Yeah. And so in the opening of the book, they say, listen, I just want to let you know that if you're going to start reading this book, you got to understand, like, you may be triggered on some of these pages. And if you are, take a day, take a week, or take an hour, take a day, take a week, take a month, and process through it. And so I'm thinking in my head, like, okay, it's not going to be anything like heavy or anything like too crucial. In the first 3 pages, Oprah starts sharing the story of how she was abused and how she was hurt, and then begin to talk about how the challenges and the trials and the trauma that that was inflicted on her as a child, as she got older, she didn't realize that it would start manifesting into this toxic behavior.
Yep.
Well, here was the trip. She kept asking this question, like, what's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And it was so funny because as soon as I started reading that, I started like breaking down, like my eyes started tearing up. Because here I am doing all of these things, traveling, encouraging people, but I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And one of the dopest things that the book began to share is seemingly senseless behavior is never senseless behavior. There's always something at the core of the root, like you were talking about, of why it happens. And so if you guys are watching this, I want y'all to really dive into this because this is crazy. They said by simply shifting the question you ask, you change how you view yourself.
Right.
And as a coach, coaching CEOs, coaching these people, I've been applying this to my practice. And what was incredible, he says, instead of asking the question, what's wrong with me? And why do I keep doing this? If we would shift the question to, what happened to me? What happened to me in my life that caused me to be able to think this way? What happened to me in my relationships or past relationships or previous relationships that now put this mindset in me that people are always going to let you down? What happened to me when it came to my beginning of me wanting to become an entrepreneur or wanting to have a family or be a healthy parent? What happened to me in my developmental stages that actually is now developing how I see the world? Because it's not always the world that's the problem. It's how we interpret and perceive the world that's the problem, right? And so how many times in our lives, when we're dealing with these toxic traits, we think we're born this way instead of asking the question, what happened to me?
What happened to me? And we get locked into those toxic traits because like knowing about how the mind works, and when I worked with my athletes, and let's see if I can break this down, your actions are always perfect based on how you perceive things. And so I wrote about this in my book, The Victory Equation.
Yeah, go get that.
One day I came up with this experience. I would toss a bottle at people, and I do it when I speak, and I tested it on my dad. Tossed the bottle at him, he would just catch it. Then I got real close to him. If you get real close to someone and then you go to chuck the bottle, usually they'll put their hands up, right? It's a survival mechanism. You just don't want to get hurt. But my dad just looked at me and like was calm. And I was like, why didn't you move or like put your hands up? He was like, I don't know. I just would have figured out a way to catch it. And then it hit me. It was like, oh, how he perceived it is exactly how his actions manifest. And in neuroscience, they've proven this. Perceptual patterns, your brain patterns, are connected to the patterns that make you act. So if the world looks threatening to you, and what I call these, I break it down simple because you know me, I got to make it simple.
Simplify it, bro.
So we have 3 experiences. You have an experience that deals with pain. I call that a number 1 experience. If you get hurt, you touch the stove, it burns you, you pull your hands back, you got hurt. Then there's a number 2 experience, maybe like a sudden death. That's emotional pain. And then there's a number 3 experience. That is a number 1 or a number 2 in your mind's eye. It's not a number 1 or 2 experience, but you think it is because, for example, someone at the wagey job was talking about another man, and that man wasn't there. And I felt my body like getting anxious. It's like, yo, you can't do that in the hood because someone gonna get hurt. And you have to learn to be like, okay, you have to learn to go into your body and just realize that that's your body. That's the number 3 experience. Your body warning you that when this happened back in the day, someone got hurt. So just be aware. So I think it's your brain making you aware of something that has threatened you in the past and could threaten you in the future if it's an actual threat. And you just have to make that distinction in the moment.
Yeah, I think like what you're mentioning transfers over to so many different areas, right? So I'm sure if you talk to people who were hurt or cheated on in relationships, you ask them why they're so guarded now. It's because that 3 experience, right? Like I remember what that felt like. I don't want to go back to that place. And I think that's why a lot of people carry around these, this hurt for so long and don't want to address it because they know it's an uncomfortable situation. And we like to be comfortable. You know, and it's like I saw this quote recently that said, you know, if you avoid a difficult conversation, you know, you're avoiding 2 minutes of discomfort for maybe a lifetime of chaos. You know, so it's like you got to weigh it on a scale, right? Yes, it may be uncomfortable in that moment to bring it up, to maybe to allow those that energy and those emotions to resurface. But the beauty in it is, if you allow it to do so, you could take that deep breath. It's been addressed at that point, right? And if you choose not to, then it's just more weight in that bag that you're carrying around forever. And I'm a believer that what's not addressed will resurface.
Every time.
Every single time. What is not addressed will resurface. And I don't care how long of time has been in between. That happened to me at 15. I'm 36 now. I'm past that. No, bro. And you can probably touch on this too, just from combos that we've had. If you are carrying around some type of trauma or hurt that has built the survival mode, or those alarms go off in your head when certain things from that situation trigger you, I don't care if you were 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and you're 40 now. It will resurface if you do not go back and address it at some point.
Right.
So as a coach, when you have people come to you and you identify this is taking place, in your opinion, what would be the best way to address those things? Obviously, it's not easy, right? And that's why I always say, like you mentioned, that inner work. The inner work's not easy. That's why people don't go to psychiatrists.
They don't do it, bro.
That's why people don't go to coaches, because you get called out on crap that you're not ready to talk about. It's easier for me to bury it than you to bring that up and make me swallow that lump in my throat
100%.
and be called out on my BS in the moment, right? And this could be a relationship, your girl on you, and she's getting on you about stuff, and you sitting there, you got that masculine ego in the back of your head, you're like, dang, she's right. She's whooping me right now, right? She's calling me out on my crap. So how do we find, what do you want to call it, vulnerability? I think it's the strength. It's not being vulnerable. It's where do we find the strength to face that person that's ugly, bro? To face that person that's not easy to face off with. Squaring up against your old self, bro.
And I think you nailed it. That type of deep work, you said something that was so freaking gold, man. I love it. You said, what'd you say about working on yourself versus working in yourself? I'm gonna answer it, but I want you to share that because it's gonna like segue kind of into what my thought was. Because you said it, I thought, bro, I was like, my God, that's gold.
There's a difference, you know. And I think we're so quick to say like, oh, you know, my girl said I need to work on my character. I need to work on my approach to difficult conversations. I got to work on the way I present myself in rooms, right? But the only way you can work on something is if you do the internal work first, because what's going on internally is what's going to reflect outside, right? So for you to work on being a better partner, you need to work on being a better man first. You need to work on being a better person first. And that's a difficult crap. It's easy. It's easy to work on the outside stuff. I'm about to walk into this business room. Let me switch it up from hood dude to professional dude real quick, right? It's easy. That's mastering an act. But to actually be that consistent person of character is the hard part, bruh. You know what I mean? That's the hard part.
The act.
It's easy to master an act. Mastering an act is nothing but memorizing a script, right? When I'm in this environment, they expect this from me. So when I step in that room, that person showed up today. But when I go home, my girl gets a different person. When I'm around my boys, they see a different person. When I go back to the old neighborhood, they see a different person. So the hard work is being that person you are at work in all those different environments.
Bruh.
And that's that inside
That's
work.
congruency.
It's congruency, and that's tough. That's that internal work.
Well, there was something that was said was like, the question is does your family know the person that everybody is cheering about when you're in your workspace or on the stage space? Does your family know that person? Does your spouse know that person? Does your kids know that person? And I think when we start talking about, like, bro, when we start talking about deep work, it's asking the question, and I love how you said it, man. It's just a difference between working in yourself and on yourself. When you're dealing within yourself, you got to ask some ugly questions, and you can no longer use your trauma as an excuse for your toxic behavior. And I think sometimes when we deal with that, we look at our toxicity, how toxic I am. And I love how you said it, bro, before we even started. You said, man, I hate how society is almost trying to make toxicity cute.
I don't like making bad things cool. I really stay away from that. Anytime they try to make drugs cool or like, I'm toxic, like, it's nothing cool about being toxic.
No, being toxic is an excuse for behavior that needs to be addressed.
But you don't want to address it.
You don't want to address it. So that's an excuse.
I'm toxic. That's it. That's the end.
Right. So we act like our toxicity is fixed because our trauma is fixed. That's what we think. When we talked about this, is we feel like our trauma is fixed. So whatever the traumatic, and trauma isn't always abuse. A lot of it is, but trauma could be a traumatic situation that happened to you in your life that you weren't doing. So case in point, you asked the question as a coach, what do I deal with when somebody has what I call internal conversations that are either ungodly beliefs or beliefs that are not congruent with who they view themselves to be, right? So the first thing I tell people is to understand how the brain works, right? So the brain has multiple levels, and you'll notice dip and touching it, but at the root of the brain is your brain stem. And your brain stem is responsible for producing files, right? This is huge. So what happens is that brain stem will take an experience, and they'll remember sound, they'll remember taste, they'll remember smell, they'll remember voice fluctuations, they'll remember appearance of things, the whole thing. And what will happen is it'll categorize a feeling to match whatever that is.
Right.
And so most of the times when we have a traumatic experience that happens when we're a child, a lot of the times when we can't articulate with words what's happening to us, the sensories will be overloaded to where if I smell somebody sounds like this, they look like this, or when you're in a place where you haven't learned how to speak up for yourself, you'll look at situation, scenario, sound, smell. This guy was 6 foot. This girl was, this size. And if you come into an environment that looks anything remotely like it, instead of interrogating and saying, is this really a threat? You immediately move off of...
Because the alarms are going off.
Your alarms are going off.
This looks familiar.
100%. And so by the time it gets to your limbic or your cortex, that it gets to the frontal cortex, where you're able to make decisions and choices that say, am I really in a threat? Am I not in a threat? You can think logically. If you don't deal with that file, you're going to always react first. And then when you run away, or after you've ruined a job opportunity, or after you ruin a relationship, you're going to feel bad about it.
Right.
And so the real question is how do we get that?
Give an example of the file.
Okay.
Or I could give one.
Yeah, give one.
I was coaching this girl who was molested by her uncle, and she would get anxiety at night. And so we went through some work. We went deep. And how you said you record every single sense. So comes to find out, we took her back into the scenario. Like when it happened, I took her back, and nobody wants to do that because it's triggered.
That's that hard work.
And you're back when your physiology changes. She start crying, and I was like, I couldn't find it. I was like, okay, what is he saying? What's going on? And then I said, in olfactory, your smell is really strong, especially in women. I said, 100%. What do you smell? She said, I smell toothpaste. So every night when she went to brush her teeth, she was getting anxiety. It was the trigger, right? But she wasn't even aware of it. So I think now we got to make a distinction between trauma we're aware of and trauma we weren't even aware of. And that's what Jeff means when he talks about in psychology. I got my BS in psychology. Nobody knows.
Go ahead, throw it out.
Come on, baby.
Nobody knows. I just did it because everybody was on me like, you ain't got no that. What? I did it online. They call that being ANO times 4. It's called a 4-tuple. And but I wanted to touch on that so they understood what you said. So then you become aware of it. Then what do you do with your clients to get them to be able to, and you said the prefrontal cortex, I call it the brakes. That's the brakes. How do you train your brakes to not take action on that trigger? For me, in mine, I actually have you interrogate that current reality.
Love that. And so in coaching, it's called interrogate the current reality.
Love that.
In other words, you have to put brakes on that thought pattern. You have to immediately interrupt that thought pattern, and then you begin to interrogate what your behavior is and why it's triggering you the way it's triggering you. So in other words, if the statement is always, every time I smell toothpaste, I'm triggered in that. And now that this is this toxic thought in my head that says every time I smell toothpaste, I think about that, I fold or I do that. The question is, okay, where did that come from? You're able to identify where it came from. Now let's talk about who you are now. Are you still in a threat when it comes to that situation? And oftentimes you'll be surprised at how many times we just keep letting movies play in our heads when it comes to business opportunities, when it comes to relationship, and we never interrogate it and say, validate that statement that you keep telling yourself that you're not good enough.
I need proof.
That I need proof. Give me proof right now that you're not good enough to step to the next level of where you are. Give me proof that you're not worthy of love. Give me proof of those. And so when you make them interrogate their current reality, they actually realize like, oh shoot, I'm not in a threatening state anymore. So therefore I can actually begin to let it go. What's deeper than that though was this idea that for me was that how many times in my life, for me, when it came to me getting frustrated and me getting angry and I would just shut down, even though I'm a communicator, where did that come from? And when I start talking deep work, like you said, where did that come from? Where was the first time that you felt insecure? What was the first time that somebody talked about you? When was the first time that you felt like you weren't good enough? You validate that based upon who you are right now, and it changes the game. One of the things I'll say this, and we'll toss this, in my coaching, one of the things that I do is called reverse parenting. Okay, so what I do is I have somebody go, and you guys can do this. I promise you, do this. It's crazy. Go to a moment or a time where you were a child, where you first felt that insecurity, when you were a teenager and you felt that insecurity. Go back to your room, and I ask them, what are you doing in your room? What are you doing in that moment? What are you doing? What are you feeling? And then they describe it. Sometimes they start crying. Sometimes they start feeling it. Now, I want you to be the parent or the person that you needed in that moment and go tell yourself what you wish you could hear at that moment.
Woo! We'll pocket that one.
What is it that you want to hear in that moment? How can you parent yourself and tell yourself, and before you know it, bro, they're crying and they're weeping because they realize that all of these years I've been held hostage by a situation that you can't control what happened to you. But you can control how you heal from that and whether or not you want to do the work to heal from that. What's your thoughts?
I love that so much, bro. And I think a big part of that is that, yes, I think we oftentimes rely on that. I'm going to call it a cop-out of, well, we can't control everything. And that's true, we can't. But I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for the things we can control. And to tie it all back together from some of the beginning statements we made is that work is hard. And it's uncomfortable. So when I talk to people now, and even when I do my own self-reflection to get better in different areas, whether it's in a relationship with, my significant other, or it's in a relationship with my parents, because a lot of times you operate in defense mechanisms in those relationships.
Facts.
Last time I said this, she got mad, right? Last time I said this, she shut down on me. Last time I told my mom this, she put me out the house, right? Last time I told this to my dad, he put the mess out of me when I was 15. So it's like those things come back. And because of those triggering moments, you allow those to almost dictate the script that you're going to have with those people. And that's not healthy. So as athletes, one of the things I always say is we got to watch film. We got to watch film. And film, let me tell you something, man.
Boy, it's cooking.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about film, babe.
You learned.
When you took an L and you have film the next day, when the coach would rewind and put the laser on you, and you guys watch the same clip, where were you at? This was your man. Let's watch it again. Where were you? Oh, you slow. Look at you get shook right here. That's what you got to do, because
that's so good.
You got bad habits, right? You didn't make the proper read. So his whole point is, I'm gonna humiliate the crap out of you so that you will never make this mistake again, because you remember what that humiliation feels like, right? So what happens is you learn to make those reads real quick. You learned, last time I did this, this happened. And what happens is you quickly change your game to avoid that embarrassment again, right? So you get put on that one-on-one coverage. He shook the mess at me last time. So I'm going to play off of him a little bit because I did my homework this time. I know his favorite move. He goes right, I'm going this way, right? So that's what we have to do in life as well. It's like, how often do we go back and watch film about the interview that didn't work out for you? How often do you go back and watch film about the relationship that didn't pan out? Yes, people play their roles in it as well, but what about the roles that you played? Where could you had done better? When they said this, how did you react to that? Because every action does have a reaction. And I think, like you said, learning how to be that person that has done that internal work is going to process things a lot differently. I think that's maturity, that's growth. I think until you do that film, you call yourself out. Yes, they did A, B, and C to me, but maybe I wouldn't be walking around in this, I'm gonna call it victim mentality, where every person's gonna do what this person did to me, or this person can never change. I mean, I think the main thing, this question came to me, and I'm gonna ask you guys this, because I think it's big and a lot of us do it. I mean, how many blessings are we missing out on because of the PTSD from what happened previously, right? It's keeping us from exploring and from receiving what could be. So what happened is keeping us from what could be. And I think that's a tough place to be in. That's why I want to get you guys' opinion on that. So when you're walking around, and whether it's a relationship that went south, and now I'm 2 years in with this person, but last time I was 2 years in with somebody, they cheated on me. Last time I was 2 years in with somebody, I woke up one day and they said they found somebody else and they were gone. Now I'm 2 years in with this person. Now, yes, there's a possibility you can go that way and be a repeat. But now, or we can go this way and it could be marriage, or it could be forever. So when you're at that fork in the road, because this is forever, this is going back to what happened to me previously, how do we decipher which way do we go? How do you build that confidence to follow your gut, to feel the faith, the foundation? What do you think?
This is the cheat code to life. Because we all have that stuff, right? I have a lot.
Yeah.
Like I'm messed up, but I have it under control to the point to where, and I think Jeff could resonate with this. So, I go to Dallas, check into my room. I'm gonna speak at this huge conference to 1,000 people. I go in the room, I'm looking in the room like, yo, there's really 1,000 people out here. 30 minutes before I have to speak, I'm cool. 30 minutes before I have to speak, I start thinking, yo, I'm gonna just go leave and not show up. I'm gonna just leave and not show up.
Right.
Bro, that's literally my thought. This is my life's work. What do you mean you ain't gonna leave and not show up?
Right.
God has directly connected risk and reward. And Jeff, you can touch on that too when you go. For some reason, the things that we're really, really scared of, as long as it's not going to physically hurt us, is what we need to do. That's what we need to take action on. And speaking terrifies me. And the reason why I say it's a cheat code is because a lot of times when you go into sports or you're going to have any kind of battle, I know that they're thinking what I'm thinking, but I can just get through it. I just know how to deal with it.
It is a cheat code. Like, I would say your biggest rewards and your biggest blessings in life are on the other side of fear. It's on the other side of fear. It's never on the other side of comfort. It's always on the other side of discomfort. It's on the other side of what doesn't look like 100% guarantee. It's almost like you're like, God, show me that's 100%, now I'll do it. But you never get that 100%. You never get that promise or that guarantee. It's like, I'm going to show you what it could be, and then the rest is going to be you stepping out on faith.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's never just like a solid, that's you 100%, go for it.
And then after you get that,
you get that rush.
You get that pursuit of happiness feeling, right? But how do we get there, though? Like, when we got that self-doubt.
So you got to ask yourself this question, not even between the self-doubt. I always ask people like, yo, how does your toxic behavior, how is it serving you?
It's not.
No, listen to what I'm saying, though. Like, what do you get out of being toxic? And most people will tell you, I get nothing out of it. That's a lie. Because the reason why we're continuing patterns, whether they're healthy or whether it's negative, is because we're getting something
subconsciously. You get some kind of reward.
You're getting some 100%. So if I'm constantly toxic in my relationships, to where my relationships never last long, and I keep self-sabotaging myself, what I'm getting out of that, it's a way of me protecting myself from being hurt. So I self-sabotage myself by being inconsistent, by cheating on somebody, by doing this. This is my way of being able to protect myself, but then I blame it on just me being toxic. Every time you want to go and become successful, you say to yourself, oh my God, I just can't become successful because I always get stuck at this level. Well, in reality, the reason why you keep doing this toxic behavior of sabotaging yourself from going out there, from making that pitch, is because once you become successful, it requires you to be somebody you've never been before. And it's more comfortable for me to stay who I am than it is for me to step out and become somebody completely brand new. It's the same thing with marriage and relationships, right? And so I asked the question, what are you getting out of toxic behavior? I'm this bad girl, and I'm this bad bee, and I'm this, hey, I'm this, I'm that, or I'm a dog, I'm cutthroat. I don't care. Like, what are you gaining out of that? That is helping you, or is it hurting you?
So good, bro.
And being real about that.
That's so good. I mean, it's like, what I just took away from that is that your new life is going to cost you your old life.
Bruh.
You cannot go into a new life of new beginnings and new unknowns, right? New blessings that you haven't encountered until you're willing to completely leave everything that you've known, everything that's made you comfortable, everything that you can identify as a comfort zone. Until you leave that, you have to be completely willing to walk away from it.
Yeah.
In order to be able to, okay, so this
To
reminds me
step into something new.
Okay, this reminds me of a scripture. Check this out. Chew on this. There's two scriptures that come to mind. The first thing it says, when I was a child, I thought like a child. I acted like a child. But when I became a man, I put my childish things away. That's
Right.
Bible.
Yeah.
Then there's another verse that says, when you're getting new wine, it says, don't put new wine in old wineskins. And so they're asking Jesus, like, how does this work? Well, what are you talking about? Well, back in the day, when you would take wine, you would get like a stomach of a camel or a goat, and you would get a brand new intestines, because when you would put the wine in and the wine would begin to ferment and expand, the stomach would expand with the actual wine. The reason why they said don't put new wine in old wineskins is once wineskin was old, it was already stretched to a certain capacity. So if you put new wine in something that was already stretched out, when it begins to ferment, it's going to bust and you're going to break and waste all of that fresh wine that's coming in. Yeah. So when God is talking to us and demanding of us to grow, we have to understand, you can't put a new life, you can't put a new relationship, you can't put a new business opportunity into an old situation, because you're going to waste it, because it's not going to be able to grow and expand with who you need to become. And so there's nothing worse than stepping into a new season with an old mindset.
Ooh, bars. Yeah.
There's nothing worse than stepping into a new relationship with an old relationship mindset, where my man Music Soul Child had a song, and he said, I'm not the one to blame for the pain that was caused by previous cats, right? So I ain't singing it because I don't want to let my, you know what I'm saying?
Out. He got a little bit though.
But he's saying, like, I'm not the one to blame because of the pain that was caused from previous people. Like, you got to see me from me. And so when you're looking at these jobs and when you're looking at these opportunities and you're looking at these blessings, like, are you looking at them through the lens of somebody who has been hurt by something in the past, and you're in a new situation in a new season? So the first thing you got to do is you got to ask yourself, what am I getting out of it? Like, for real. And if what you're getting out of it is going to push you to where you need to be, then that's one thing. But if your toxic behavior is your way to protect yourself, and most times I think toxic behavior, y'all weigh in on this. My thought is, when somebody is toxic, it's their way of trying to protect themselves.
It's a shield.
It's a shield.
100%.
It's a shield. And we see, everybody know what my shield is. It's aggression.
What's your shield?
My shield is aggression, competitive, kind of a like a coach, right? Like how a coach talked to us. Like in the military, they say shame creates change, and
I disagree.
Yeah, to a point. So I feel bad when I'm not congruent with my identity. It makes me feel like really bad. So when we go into our shield, when we go into our toxic stuff, there was a stimulus for that, right? So all I do is I create a different stimulus, and the stimulus that works for me is does that fit? Okay, if Roy is 6% body fat strong, but I want a donut, does that fit? And that craving goes right away. If I'm loving to this person and they make me angry, and then I, get toxic,
right?
Does that fit? Then
so
no.
it's making sure that your actions are congruent with your character and who you aspire to be.
My new wine.
Yeah.
My new identity, right?
The person you aspire to be.
And then also, you got to have some grace for sometimes when you don't catch the break, when you don't break, when you do have that amygdala hijack, to give it a psychological term. When you do hop into that, sometimes you got to give yourself grace. Like, dang, man, I ate donuts every day this week, man. I'm tripping.
So here's something. Let me see if you guys agree with this. I was having a conversation recently. I was sharing this with Christian. I was having a conversation with a guy who is a licensed, what they call him, a marriage and family
therapist,
yes.
MFT.
Thank you. So it was interesting. So we got on this conversation about congruency and being steadfast in the person that you want to be, right? And he was saying that far too often we make these decisions and these commitments, right? Whether it's a new relationship or a new job, with short-term results in mind. We don't think long-term. So this was the example I asked him to elaborate. This was the example he gave me. He said, let's use two examples. Let's use the person that jumps from job to job to job, and let's use the person that dates and goes from relationship to relationship to relationship, or situation. We won't call them relationships, right? So he says, the benefit of when you are constantly going to new jobs or you're constantly dating new people, they don't know the real you, right? They're getting the best version of you. They're getting the honeymoon phase. They're getting the new employee that they're filling out because we don't know their full potential yet. We don't know what level of expectation to set for them because they're this new employee. We got to fill them out and see what skills they have, right? Or how much experience do they have that they're bringing to the company or the relationship. Yeah. So he says the challenge in these situations is that at a certain point in a relationship and at a certain point at a job, both will begin to expect more from you. You're not a new employee anymore. You've been here a year and a half. We're not talking anymore. We've been dealing with one another for a year now. So I need A, B, and C from you. I need, you to step up, or this performance evaluation, you're going to take a hit, right? So in other words, many of us run from those situations because we're not willing to challenge ourselves to step up to become the person that they're requiring us to be in those situations.
That's huge.
You see what I mean?
That's huge.
So if you're in a relationship and you're with someone who is saying, I'm squared away, I got what I want in life, this is the next level, either you have to meet it or you have to go. He was saying, we'll look for an escape. We start looking for the emergency exit. Where can I get out? Man, you always tripping, blah, blah, blah. That's why I can't communicate with you. That's why we don't get along now, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm going to move on and find somebody else. At the job, man, you always micromanaging me. Man, you always coming here trying to get me to do blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go find me a new job. Yeah. So, sheesh. Again, the question, and this is, I want to dial in on this because this is like, I think, a tangible skill and a tangible lesson someone could take away and apply this in every area of their life, right? You will get to, I'm going to say it this way. You will get to a certain point in every area of your life where it's scary to excel past that threshold. Yeah. If it's dating and the marriage is a talk, it's scary to get there, right? If you've been someone who's never led a team, now we're talking about, hey, next month you got 30 direct reports. That's scary. I've never led people before. It's requiring you to become someone you've never been, right? Being a husband, I've never been a husband. That's thought of it is scary to me. Being a father is scary to me. You got people, it's life and death if I don't come through. So how do we break through thresholds in life? Because it's not if, it's when for all of us, right? There's a point where you have to push yourself past the comfort zone. In the gym, you don't get the gains by sitting there lifting 10 pounds, right? Yeah. You got to get real uncomfortable, do the grunts. You got to push. I need someone to spot me. You have to look crazy, right? To get through those thresholds and to break through for those new gains. How do we get our gains in life? How do we break through those uncomfortable moments? And I don't even know if we have the answer for it, but I want to chew on it a little bit. Like, what do you do to break through thresholds?
The biggest thing for me, and again, this is so weighty because I think the first thing is honesty.
With yourself?
With yourself. Like, I'm talking about raw, real honesty. And for me personally, I say it's not until you get real that God becomes real in your life. And it's not until you get real with the situation of where you are that I believe that God can come in and really start doing the work with you. That's deep work, like being honest with yourself.
So let me ask you this quick question. Curveball. Is it toxic to admit to yourself that you're not ready? Someone else will call you toxic and say you're running from the challenge. But what if you just tell yourself, I'm not ready? Now, are you running, or is that being honest after internal reflection to say, I'm not the person I need to be to step into the situation yet? Is running away from a challenge toxic?
Yes. No. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Wait. Okay. Yeah. Elaborate on that.
We're capable of so much. So
you think it's your mind playing those tricks?
It's your mind playing tricks because of the pressure of taking care of your business
in every area. Or
no.
Let me give an analogy. Let me give an analogy. I did the hardest day hike in America. 19 hours, 10,000 elevation climb. You find out so much about yourself.
That is true.
You think you're strong, you're not.
You get humbled.
You think you get humbled real quick, right? but then you also get to see what you're capable of. And I found out personally I was capable of way more than I thought. When I thought, yo, I need to quit, you can't quit because you're out there in the wild. Where you gonna go?
Okay.
So where in the gym where I feel like I need to quit, I could quit. Out there, you can't quit because it's survival. So you gotta push past and you gotta figure it out.
I feel like you're not vibing with it.
No. Yes and no. I think there's a difference between running from something and knowing, am I prepared? Am I in the right mindset to be able to do it? If you're about to go take that number one hike, you can't motivate yourself and say, I'm ready next week to do it if you haven't done the work that's needed for you to step into that space. So if you're asking yourself the question of, yo, am I ready for this relationship? The question is have you done the work on yourself personally?
Because you can't get in shape the morning of your hike.
You can't get in shape the morning of your hike. And so if I say I'm not
been doing the work.
If I'm saying I'm not ready, that is watch this. The word is honest assessment of where I'm at. Have I given myself an honest assessment that says I've been doing the deep work to make sure that I'm healthy to be in a relationship, or am I so dealing with codependency and I'm insecure that I'm not ready for that relationship? Have I done the deep work to say that I've dealt with a lot of my trauma, my issues? I've dealt with understanding, okay, this is where I'm at in this situation. Now I'm in a relationship and I know I have to cross that threshold to be able to commit. I know this person has what it is I'm looking for, or I know that business has what it is I'm looking for, and I know that I've prepared myself for it. So now I have to cross that threshold into trust. There's a big difference between the
So is it a mindset shift?
Yeah. So the differentiating factor is asking yourself in those moments, have I done the work?
Have I done the work?
So is it a mindset shift?
Partly, but then a lot of it is practical.
It could be, because it could be physical too, right?
Yeah.
Like you can be like, oh, I've thought about this hike, but I'm 350 pounds and I haven't worked out in 2 years. That's not mindset. It don't matter what your mindset is. You're not gonna make the hike.
Yeah, but nobody's gonna die out there. They gonna get up there. They're gonna get up.
I'm sorry, dog.
How many?
Sorry, bro. You out of your mind. If somebody has never worked out a day in their life, your heart ain't right. You ain't worked out. You're overweight.
I like to ask the fire. How many rescues y'all done up there? Like,
there's a lot. But people get hurt. If you hurt an ankle, you can't walk. You're done.
Okay, watch this. Look at Mount Everest. There are people who have trained from Mount Everest, and while you're climbing up that mountain, there's a pocket where you're like, uh-oh.
Right.
I might not make this. And their will to go is them pushing it forward, and they end up dying and having to be carried down. Yeah. There has to be an honest assessment that says, okay, I've reached my capacity. I've reached my limit where I'm at right now. As much as I want this, I may not be here. Look, I'll give you this case in point, because I know we this will open up a whole nother thing. Look, Bishop Jake said this, and I thought this was one of the most powerful statements.
Shout out Uncle TD.
Yeah, hello, Uncle TD, man. Bishop, I love you. I was talking to my sister about this thing, and he gave this analogy. He asked this dude to come over, and he asked him for his jacket. Bishop took his jacket off. Bishop, like 6 foot, like he's a big dude. Yeah. Takes his jacket off and hands it to his guy who was on the stage. He's, now give me your jacket. So the guy gives him his jacket, and he puts the jacket on, and Uncle TD can't fit in the jacket. Watch this. He goes, I can't fit in this jacket. As much as I love the jacket, just because I love something doesn't mean I'm a right fit for it. And I think what happens when it comes to toxic behavior is that we love something so much, but we haven't asked ourselves the question, am I a right fit for it? I may love this industry so much, but am I a right fit for it? And so that's where it comes into a place where we have to do deep work on ourselves and be honest with this toxic mindset and toxic behavior that says, I may love this industry. I may love the idea of being a parent. I may love the idea of being married, but am I a good fit for it in this season based off of the internal deep work that I've done? It's an honest assessment. You got to keep it 100 with yourself. And it's that place of honesty that will allow you to know where you need to start at.
That's so real, man. I think it was one of your. It might have been Mama Osborne, or maybe it was your mom. But I remember like being the kids we were like in the living room. I think we were talking about our relationships, and one of the moms said, "You're in love with the idea of being in love."
That's my mom.
And that's so real, bro. Right. Because it's like you're in love with the idea of being in love in a relationship, right? You're in love with the idea of being a millionaire and being this successful entrepreneur. And I love that because what it's saying is that you're in love with this like ideology, but you're not being realistic of the work that it takes, right? Like you're not in love with waking up every day and going through the arguments and the mundane disagreements and getting to know somebody like you and your wife have, bro. We're what 20 years, 18 years in, whatever you guys have. 19 years, bro. So it's like that is day in and day out. That's not in love with the idea of marriage. That's in love with the person to have built this marriage, right? So it's not being in love with the idea. It's you need to be in love with the process, and I think that's the distinguishing factor. A lot of people are not, right? People are in love with the idea of having a six-pack in the summer body, but you're not in love with taking your butt to the gym every day. You're not in love or committed to that process, right? Oh, I'm in love with having the master's degree and the doctor title, but I'm not in love with the 11 years of school that it's going to take me to get there.
So one of the things, okay, well then, if love is one of it, but I'll add this in, is you have to have a proper assessment of the work that's needed for you to get there. And that's a big toxic trait that people have. You underestimate the work that it's needed for you to grow. You underestimate the work that's needed for you to have a successful relationship. And secondly, one of the biggest ways for us to get rid of toxic behavior is getting rid of the right to want to be right.
Ooh.
Like
I disagree with that one.
You have to. Okay, so I'm gonna have you give it.
But
if you would rather be right than to do what's right, that's toxic.
It comes down to one thing: be right or love. Be right about whatever. That's why we talked about non-negotiables. But there's a lot of things that trigger us that weren't even our non-negotiables. And then we start acting in a toxic way. And then we try to exit stage left when it wasn't even a non-negotiable. Everything that's not a non-negotiable can be worked out.
But it's not always a non-negotiable though. Like there's sometimes, like for example, I'll give you an example in a relationship, right? There are times where people will see behaviors in us that we don't see in ourselves because that's who we are. Right. I've been operating like this for 20 years. So wifey call you out on something, she's not wrong. Because that's her experience. You come in here acting a dang fool every day, right? You in here raising your voice. You walk around here flexing, you tripping, right? We don't want to hear that, but that's her experience. That doesn't make her wrong. So, yes, it's love, but you also have to acknowledge the fact that she's right on this one, and you have to do the work.
Right, but and I think that's what I'm saying. In that instance, if you come in and you're acting a fool every single day, your desire to want to be right is going to stop you from doing what's right. And so if you're ever going to let go of toxic behavior, I can't want to be right because this is just who I am. Right. I've got to look at what my wife is saying, what my kids are saying, what my job is saying, and how many people die on a hill that wasn't worth dying on, like you talked about. So you dying in arguments that you should not be dying in. That's one of the things I love about you, though, is you'll say it like, yo, I'm not too prideful to say I'm not right, or I'm not too prideful to say I was wrong. And that's what I'm talking about. If you're going to let go of toxic behaviors, we also got to let go of the right to want to be right, and to understand that if you're in a relationship or if you're at a job or something like that, they may own a piece of the truth. You own a piece of the truth, and you got to come together and really create those changes. So here's my question: as we look at this idea of toxicity, we may have to do a part two.
I'm saying, though,
and bring this up like, help, I'm toxic.
I want to get off.
Bruh. So when we talk about toxicity and we talk about being able to release these toxic mindsets that no longer serve you, release these toxic ways of being that no longer help you get to where you want to go. If you had to sum up a truth that you would want them to walk away with from this episode, and again, this is so deep. We could be 3 or 4 episodes deep. And yeah, listen, you guys comment.
Let us know.
Yeah, comment and let us know. Do you want a part 2 of this? Because I mean, we could go so deep in this bad boy.
Right. We can take some of y'all.
We want your opinions on it. Yeah, we want to see it. So, what would you say out of this whole entire conversation, this bros conversation that we had about toxic behavior, things to release toxic? What is toxic?
Give them something.
Yeah, give them something that you would want them to walk away with, bruh, when it comes to this.
Just realize that you can work on your brakes, and it's your trauma or that feeling isn't fixed. And get in touch with the feeling. The reason why I talk so much about I don't agree with going to therapy is because those number 1, 2, and 3's experience, we have millions of them, and you can't break down all million of them, right? And so my way of doing it is going into my body. When I feel it coming on, I experience my body sensations. So If I'm on stage and I'm nervous, instead of labeling it nervous, I say, what am I actually experiencing? I feel like a warmness in my chest. Okay. So then what happens is it's hard to work when you're nervous, but it's easy to work when you just have a warmness in your chest. Like it's like having a rock in your shoe. It's uncomfortable, but I can still do what I have to do. So get in touch with your actual body so that you can still act in that moment. And then real quick, you want to know, don't let your child mind, like the verse you talked about, I wanted to touch on this. Think about number 1 and 2 experiences when you're a child, traumas as you're a child. Something super small could be a big deal to you, and you created PTSD for something that wasn't a big deal, like
That's
a
good.
whooping
That's real.
or someone taking something from you. So a lot of life sentences we created as childs over something that wasn't that big of a deal.
That's deep. What about you, Cam?
Man, that was good. I always say that you have to live and not just exist. And I think if you're saying that you're living life, that means that you're creating a life that's by design. And you're not, that means you're actively and proactively choosing the type of life that you want, the type of life that you're willing to not settle for, and that you're willing to do whatever, however, in order to have that life. And I say that because I think that victim mentality, or utilizing your past experiences, the toxic stuff, as an excuse for your current behavior, you're just existing, which means you're no longer actively choosing and designing the life that you want. You're settling for past experiences to still surface in your reality. And I think that's it takes a lot of mindfulness,
Right.
but it doesn't mean because something happened once it has to happen twice.
Right.
I think there's, like you mentioned, going on stage and being able to just dissect how you're feeling. But I think there's something that you have to have in those moments called awareness.
Yeah.
And
I love that,
you
bro.
have to get to a point where you're aware of how you're feeling, what's triggering it, and you can kind of move on from that point. So I think, be aware of what you're experiencing, be aware that it happened, but be even more aware that it doesn't have to be a reality. Leave it in the past where it is, because new blessings can't come from, past trauma.
I love that, man. And I would add, lastly, is, I know you mentioned about therapy. I think therapy has a place. And I think therapy does hurt when you want to make sure that your therapist isn't just trying to keep recycling old problems without moving you forward into solutions.
Right.
I think some of us get stuck on just, this happened to me as a kid. This happened to me as a kid. This happened to me as a
That
kid.
broken record.
Yeah, that broken record. Now, the goal is, and that's the thing, that's what I love about transformational coaching, is we can acknowledge what happened in your past, but how are we going to move you forward?
Come on.
And I would add this, lastly, is that when we talk about trauma, remember this. It's one thing to cut people out of your life because you're growing and because they are choosing to be in a pattern that no longer serves where you're going. It's another thing to cut people out of your life because they're holding you accountable. And whenever we're talking about toxic traits, I wish we could have really dove into this, but who you have around you is so imperative that you allow people to speak into your life when you are displaying toxic traits, and you're able to let them know, hey, look, this is sideways that you acted this way. You shouldn't have acted that way. And when you distance yourself from people because they're holding you accountable, then you will look for people to reinforce those toxic traits. You're going to feel stuck. Yeah. And so I would say, in the process of being able to let go of that, get people like my brothers and like Hop and Jay.
In the words of Blueface, the truth can never be a diss.
I love that. Hey, hey, well, with that being said, we're going to close it out on that quote. But hey, listen, you guys, thank you for coming in on this conversation. Thank you for being with us and rocking with us on Bros to Men. If you haven't, we want you to make sure that you go and click the subscribe button. Make sure you leave some comments down below. We want to hear what your thoughts are. We want to hear some topics that you would love for us to touch on. And most importantly, we want to thank you for being a part of this community as we keep bringing content that inspires action. Once again, I'm Jeff, a.k.a. J.O.
It's your boy Roy, a.k.a. Dips.
It's Cam, man. We loving all y'all. Appreciate you.
Love y'all. Peace.